Late lunch, LMFM radio. Coming up on the show this afternoon, John Lowe, the money doctor, is with us after 3 o'clock. Tony Conlon's motoring at 2:30. John Woolley, a businessman from Navan, is with us at 2 to talk about the Congo. But first today, having your name appear in Stubbs Gazette is something most people wouldn't like to see. No matter how you dress it up, there's a stigma that tends to stick, no matter what happens with a person's financial situation subsequently. So for the next while, we're going to talk about Stubbs with the marketing manager of the Gazette, Niamh McArdle. Niamh, you're very welcome to the show.
Good morning, Gerry. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. You're a Dublin lassie, but you're living now in Drogheda. How did that come about?
It came about because I was in Boston a good few years ago working away, and I met my current husband, well, my only husband, sorry, Martin McArdle, and he was from Drogheda. So after a few years together in Boston, we decided to leave Boston and come home and set up roots in Ireland. And at the time, property prices were extremely high, and Martin was from Drogheda. So we compromised and we bought a house in Drogheda.
And you thought it was the dream scenario. God knows what happened subsequently. We won't even get into that.
Exactly.
So you met in Boston. What were you doing over there?
I had gotten a sponsorship from a private psychiatric facility in Harvard Square. I had just graduated from Queen's University with a degree in psychology, and a company over there sponsored me to come over and actually work in a sort of clinical role with patients in a clinical setting. So I did that for a few years and really enjoyed it.
Why did you come back?
I came back because I'm very close to my family. I felt I had spent enough time there. I'd made some money, and that the time was right. You know, we were in a position to buy a house and settle down. So that's kind of where it came from. Any
regrets today when you look at where the country is at the moment? Do you ever hark back and think, God, maybe we'd have been better staying in Boston?
I don't think so. I was there for September 11th, so I did sort of experience the aftermath of all that as well, and the effect that had on America. I'm a firm believer when you make a decision, you know, you look at the positives, and you know, we made the decision, and I don't have any regrets. I think, you know, working through the last few years, through the struggles and everything, will do us all good. We'll come out stronger at the end, hopefully.
That's what we like to hear. Positivity. No matter what it's like today, there's always a brighter day. Yes, on the other side. You have a degree, as you said there, in psychology, but you're a glutton for punishment. You're a double degree holder now because you went a completely different route. Why?
I did. When I moved home to Drogheda, I didn't get into psychology. I kind of wanted to break from it because it was quite intense in the particular clinic I worked in Boston. So I had just moved to Drogheda, so I was finding my bearings, and I took a temporary position in a local auctioneers, O'Brien Collins, who were doing great things at the time, selling lots of properties and everything. So they took me on. It was a temporary position, but then I was made full time. And then, yeah, as you said, a glutton for punishment, I decided to learn more about sort of the economics behind property, and I undertook a part-time degree in property economics and DIT.
Isn't it great to have a psychologist qualified working in property economics? I think you'd need that, wouldn't you, really, to well, if you were working at it today. But you're not. You're with Stubbs Gazette now. How did that come about?
After my position in O'Brien Collins, I had 2 children sort of in between my position there. And after my second little girl was born, Ellie, I decided to take a career break for about a year. And then I got itchy feet again and kind of was at home, and she was settled and everybody was in a routine, and Ava was starting school. So I started looking around for a job, and I saw a position with Stubbs Gazette. The company itself has always, you know, I think it fascinates everybody what is Stubbs Gazette about. So I went for a marketing role there, and I succeeded and was accepted and brought in as the team.
How long are you there now with them?
It'll be 3 years in October.
So you have your feet well under the table at this stage. Stubbs Gazette, I never realised till I went to look at this today. I always had a thing in my mind that it might be international, but it is Irish.
It is, yeah. It's been around since 1828, so it's absolutely an Irish institution. It's one of the longest running publications in the world, as I said, around since 1828.
Now, when you hear it, I said in the introduction there, people say, oh, you'll be in Stubbs, you'll end up in Stubbs. You know, that is it just rolls off the tongue. You know, people use it all the time when maybe people take a chance or borrow or do things in their lives. Is it fair to say that that stigma still exists?
Well, it's funny you say that. Looking at people that have appeared in Stubbs, one of the earliest entries in Stubbs of somebody famous was James Joyce's father, John Joyce. That was around the time of his birth, around 1882. And apparently, when he appeared in Stubbs, he was suspended from work. So even back then, it just shows you, you know, the brand carried a lot of weight in Irish society. And
there's a lot of names have appeared in, and a lot of water under the bridge since those distant days, and some very prominent people today. The Health Minister, James Riley, his name has appeared now.
Yes, that was probably the most controversial entry. It was all over the media, and really it was because it was the first ever cabinet minister to appear in Stubbs Gazette. So that was massive, really. He was basically one of 5 investors who had a €1.9 million judgment registered against him and his group of investors, and it was over failure to complete a deal involving a nursing home.
And for Riley to appear in it and be a government minister, I said the trepidation and fear and everything like that, but yet he carries on regardless. He holds his position, he works away, he's in a very prominent position in government in this country. So really, you know, I said to you, there is fear and trepidation among people, but yet it doesn't hold some people back.
I suppose it depends on the position. I mean, James Riley was such a unique case, but for 99% of the other people that appear in the publication, it does have an adverse effect on your credit rating. So I think James Riley was just in a you know, it was a very unique situation. He was the first ever cabinet minister, and you know, he did have to answer some very hard questions on it too.
But you're saying for the majority of people whose names are published in your Stubbs Gazette that it is a negative thing, and a negative thing that stays with people forever?
Well, it definitely stays with you for a while, because, you know, we collect the data from the courts, it appears in the publication, and then we upload that data onto our Stubbs Gazette Credit Bureau. So the judgment is up there, and when you go to your local credit union, for example, to take out a loan, the credit union will log into our Stubbs Gazette Credit Bureau. They'll do a check. If they see that you have a judgment registered against you, they may decide that it's too risky to give you the loan. And if they do decide that they're going to give you the loan, it'll probably be sort of a risk premium in the form of a higher interest rate.
So when you do appear, it has serious implications. That's what you're saying to me, that, Niamh, there's no way around that. Very few people don't have consequences from it.
No, unless you satisfy the actual judgment, which means whether you repay it, then obviously we print that too.
That's what it's coming to next. Yeah. So you do a recovery, in other words. So if somebody can sort themselves out and clear their name, pay their debts, come to an agreement or something, you will also, does that always follow on naturally?
Well, after somebody has had a judgment registered against them, as I said, it will appear on the credit bureau, and creditors will make the decision whether or not they want to take the risk. It's up to the creditor after that whether they want to take any further action. They do have some options available to them. They can, get the sheriff in to seize assets in very extreme cases. They can force the person into bankruptcy, for example. So at that point, it's up to the creditor as to whether or not they want to take it further. But generally speaking, getting a judgment registered against somebody is getting it into the public domain.
So you have that registered against you, appear in Subs. There could be a follow-up clarification if you do clear it or whatever. But when somebody is checking your credit rating, you're saying to me, they'll see both.
They will see that the judgment is there, and they'll also see if it's been satisfied.
So they then have to make a call then on that basis.
Yeah.
In general terms, is it more men than women? Just to ask you a sexist question here, or can it be across the board? Like, would you say, with men in business, traditionally more so down through the years, surely it would have been a male-dominated publication?
I think probably in the early years and up until a good few years ago, it might have been more men, but obviously women are in business now, so they're absolutely susceptible.
So it has changed.
It has changed. There's a lot of female company directors as well. There's a lot of people. I know it's definitely across the board.
Covers
men and
both
women.
now at this stage. What is there a lower limit that I can appear in Stubbs Gazette for? You know, if there's a small debt involved, let's say hundreds of euro that's owed.
We have seen judgments for that amount. Yeah.
Have you?
Telephone companies have taken out 250, 300 euro judgments against people who failed, to pay back their telephone bill.
So utility bills would even come in under...
Now, it's quite costly for the creditor to do that, but, you'd probably suspect in that instance that the creditor, for example, is just making a point, if you like. It's more kind of the principle of it. So they're showing to other debtors out there or to other customers that, we will take action against you, even if it is for 300 euros.
And it follows on from what you said earlier, that once that's there. It flashes like a red light anywhere you go. So it casts doubt over your credibility.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it can be a small number, and then of course up to millions at this stage. In the last while, in the last 3 years, and we're going to come on in a little while and talk about the insolvency, but are there more people appearing in Stubbs Gazette because of the situation they find themselves in after the crash?
Yes, I think where the levels of death have reached such an unprecedented level, that creditors have been trying to resolve the situation with the debtors, and debtors, I think, are so heavily indebted that they may just, be burying their head in the sand and not responding to the creditors. And unfortunately, when communication breaks down and the creditor tries, to come to some sort of arrangement with the debtor, if the debtor isn't playing their part and, being upfront about what their financial capacity is, etc., the creditor has been left with no other option but to take the legal route, which is the registered judgment. So there has been definitely an increase in the volume of judgments that have been taken against Irish businesses and people over the last few years. Now,
at one stage, of course, it was published in a magazine form or book, paper, newspaper form, or whatever you like, Stubbs. How is it published now, and how frequently is it published?
It is. We have a few different customer bases. We originally had just a subscription service, whereby all of the creditors in Ireland, it's their Bible really. So they all subscribe to Stubbs. So they have the option to get it emailed to them on a weekly basis in a PDF style, or they can get a hard copy every 2 weeks. So a printed version gets sent out to them. But actually, during my time at Stubbs, we made the decision to actually make the publication available in all retail shops, and that was the first time that it would be available to everybody, if you like, in Ireland. And we have now, just as recently as last week, developed a new app, so a new Stubbs Gazette app. So for this new sort of market that's coming down the track very quickly, everybody who's on iPads and iPhones, etc., they can now download Stubbs Gazette for free. They'll get a snippet from the most recent edition of Stubbs, and then they have the option to buy that particular week's version there and then on their phone, or they can even subscribe to it for the year.
Moving with the times, Stubbs Gazette, first published way back in the early 1800s, alive and well and thriving today, and no wonder. Niamh McArdle is marketing manager with Stubbs, and we're going to talk more shortly. Niamh McArdle from Drogheda is the marketing manager with Stubbs Gazette. Where do you source your information in the main? We
source our information from the courts and from other sources, yeah. And we have information not only on judgments registered in Ireland, but also the equivalent in England and Wales, Scotland and Wales. And also in addition to judgments, we have, all of the insolvency notices in regards to companies. So which companies are failing, which are being liquidated, which have got a receiver going into them, all of that business.
So you cast your net further than these shores, because a lot of trade, of course, happens between ourselves, England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. That'd be important as well for people. Can you do a comparison at all? We're in LMFM land here, Louth versus Meath. How do the two counties, or do you ever compare them with one another in terms of judgments?
Yes, I had a quick look at the volume and value of judgments registered in Louth and Meath since 2010. And since 2010, there's been 45% more judgments registered in Meath compared to Louth. Now, this is probably due to, the differences in the populations between the two counties. Overall, the value of the judgments registered in Meath far exceeded those in Louth too.
Do you have a figure on those, no?
Sorry?
Do you have a figure on those, no?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that,
overall, what would Louth be overall and Meath overall?
Well, there was 2 or 3 really significant bumper judgments in Meath, which kind of put the figure way up. For example, like in 2011, there was 3 very large judgments varying from 5 million up to 23 million. The 23 million euro judgment was against an accountant, and it was taken by ACC Bank. Also in Louth, for example, in 2010, there was a 3 million euro judgment taken against a Louth person by CAB, the Criminal Assets Bureau. Oh. So there's a huge array of plaintiffs out there, but the revenue and the utility companies and the banks obviously are the most active plaintiffs.
So more cases in Meath and a higher value on them as well, is what you're saying, much more than the Louth ones. Mm-hmm. The new personal insolvency bill, of course, you're going to be right at the heart of this, Niamh. Do you welcome it, first off?
We absolutely welcome it. We completely endorse it. We're doing everything that we can, even at Stubbs Gazette, to make sure it's a success. So what we're doing is we're building software for the insolvency practitioners, the PIPs. That's the acronym now that we'll all have to become familiar with. The personal insolvency practitioners, they're the guys that are going to be managing the schemes. So obviously we saw the opportunity in the market that they would need a very good software platform to manage these schemes. So we've developed PIPEX.
Is that a play on the white stuff that we used as corrector?
Oh, no. It's a play on
correct
PIP.
things. Tipex, Pipex.
Well, yes, I like that.
Did you ever think about
that's
that?
Very clever, yeah.
Have I come across something here today?
Very
There's a fair
Tipex,
link there, you know
like
what I mean?
That, yeah.
Yeah, because the Tipex, deleted something.
Yes,
corrector.
Yes. And that's what these new debt solutions will hopefully do for people, that they will... if the criteria is met, obviously, they will give people a clean slate, and it's very welcoming because it's long overdue. People are really, struggling at the moment, and they will have, one of these options that will be available to them. So that's good news for them. But
isn't it worrying that I think a survey you carried out showed that there's an awful lack of education or understanding of the new legislation? How would you say, what needs to be done there? Does the government need to get people out or information out on the ground to people quickly? And
yes, we commissioned Red Sea to conduct a survey of a representative sample in Ireland, and we were dismayed to see that only 36% of the sample surveyed were aware of this new bill. So that means that only a very small percentage of people at the moment know of this bill, and that there are options available to them. So, I think the Insolvency Service of Ireland, which has been set up by the government, they will be starting an awareness campaign very, very shortly to increase public knowledge. And we also, at Stubbs Gazette, have been holding roadshows for both the debtors and the creditors, all the key stakeholders, if you like, to really increase awareness on the legislation. We had one there about 2 weeks ago in the Law Society, and we had about 3 or 4 keynote speakers, and we had about 250 people attend. So there's a huge appetite out there in terms of knowing what it's about, but it's quite complex. So I think the main objective for the ISI and for the government is to really break it down for people and teach them that there are options available, and that there is light at the end of the tunnel.
And, you read the commentators on it. Some welcome it. You welcome it. Your company welcomes it. Others question it, that it hasn't gone far enough, that it gives too much power to the banks. Have you anything to say on that?
I mean, there's always going to be dissenting voices with any type of legislation that comes into effect. The way I would see it is, maybe it isn't enough, but let's just start off with what it's proposing at the moment, and let's support it, and let's try and get it up and running. It should be up and running in the next few weeks. There's also, there's always going to be things that can be improved on, but really, in summary, there's 3 brand new options that have never ever been on offer before to Irish people who are struggling, and I think that has to be welcoming.
Do you ever get anybody, when their name appears in it, that go ballistic or contact you going haywire over? Now, of course, you're producing information from the court, as you said, and other sources, but do people ever, can you remember an instance of somebody,
Well, there's always a lot of backlash, and people. Yeah,
is there really?
Said, oh well, there is, and we'll get calls saying I've received a Stubbs Gazette demand letter. I mean, they're obviously quite powerful letters because the brand is on the letter, and all we want to do is open up the communication channels between the debtor and the creditor, and that's our primary objective. And it is what it is. We don't make apologies. We're there to protect businesses from making bad credit decisions. So
you do the chasing first before you publish, is that it? Will you give somebody an opportunity?
Absolutely. I mean, if the creditor gives us that opportunity and makes us their agent, if you like, for trying to collect the debts, we act as a mediator. We put together a treatment plan, so it's kind of like your informal arrangement. And then if that fails, which it generally doesn't when we're looking after it, but if it does fail, the creditor then will sometimes go down the legal route, and that's when the judgment gets registered. So
you've been at this debt resolution for years. That's what you're telling me here, that this is nothing new to you. It's new on the statute books here, certainly.
Absolutely. We've just been doing it informally. This new piece of legislation will formalise it.
Do you generally find that people, I know there's some people just can't pay, and that's the bottom line, and there's going to be one of the strands, as you say, of the new bill that's going to look after, and that's the reality of it, and people have to have that lifted from them over time and try and get going again, as you say. But do you often find that people, they wait till the last minute? And
there are those that can pay, and that those that don't pay, and that's fact. There are strategic defaulters out there, and I think some people have raised concerns that this legislation has given them the opportunity to maybe, purposely default on their mortgage and on other loans, to wait for this to come into effect and then to avail of it and to get, debts written off. But I want to assure people that that's not the case. When people are applying for one of these arrangements, I mean, there's very, very strict criteria, and the insolvency practitioners are very, very aware of what they need to be looking out for. And the debtor, when they're applying for these arrangements, they're going to have to, provide a sworn statement of affairs, all their bank statements, all their pay slips. So it'll be very obvious. And if anything, they're actually putting more light on themselves that they are a strategic defaulter, because it's going to become very obvious very quickly when one looks at their bank statements whether or not they could have actually been paying off their mortgage and they just were choosing not to.
Change times, new legislation, a lot to come, as they say, down the road. Niamh McArdle, Marketing Manager with Stubbs Gazette, thank you so much for joining us today and shedding some light on the work your company does. Thanks a million.
Thank you.
God, we're getting everything in timing-wise today just spot on. I looked out the window this morning. I didn't know whether it was the 19th of March or the 19th of December. Tony Conlon's laughing here. I suppose you felt... Well, maybe you didn't see the snow that we saw, did you today?
Yeah, I did indeed, yeah.
I looked out and I said, holy God, we'll be back to talking about tyres and chains on tyres and changing wheels for the weather and everything.
Weird, really,
it's weird, isn't it? It's crazy weather. Anyway, he's with us again this month, our motoring correspondent, Tony Conlon, and I'm delighted to welcome a special guest into studio this afternoon. He's Peter Dorn, and he's the MD of Hyundai Drogheda and Hyundai Skoda and Mazda in Carrickmacross. Peter, thanks very much for joining us as well.
You're very welcome, Gerry. Thank you.
What do you make of the weather to start? She's queer stuff.